This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of WEBIT Virtual, Dr. Plamen Rusev.
A wonderful pleasure to be with you from all around the world, having the opportunity using virtual reality, in this case, really in virtual world, to be with you and to enjoy the opportunity to share the beauty of our minds with our global community from all around the world. Thank you for joining us again for this live session. And without further ado, I will just remind you that this year's WEBIT Live virtual events are all about supporting the SDGs and the goal 2030. Achieving those SDGs is in our DNA of the number of virtual events that we are hosting throughout season number 2. The first season was phenomenally successful, thanks to all of you. At the end, we ended up with over 1 million attendees of our events during the whole 2020, the craziest year in our lives yet. But hey, craziness continues, and we definitely need to work on bringing this new desirable future, new normal desirable future, and support it with our own hands, and of course, beautiful ideas. Today, I will meet you with another of our wonderful community members who have created something some time ago, and it really makes a difference. Most probably, it will be a great basis for something even better and more interesting. But I would like to hear this from him. And without further ado, I will just tell you that one thing I've read from him was that he said, in order to survive this automation revolution, we need to double down on our own humanity. Let's see who our guest is.
Dennis Mortensen is the CEO and co-founder of xAI. Dennis is an expert in leveraging data to deliver business insights. A serial entrepreneur, Dennis built and successfully exited several companies before founding xAI in 2014. Along with co-founder Marcus J. Belangner, Dennis set out to solve a painful problem: scheduling meetings through a sophisticated AI platform that saves people time and effort. Dennis is a recognized leader, author, and university instructor in the field of digital data and analytics. Originally from Denmark, Dennis lives in New York with his family.
Dennis, welcome to WEBIT Virtual. How are you?
I am happy. How are you?
Feeling great. Thanks for accepting our invitation, and look forward to walk you through your journey. I've already promised our attendees to discuss about the future of work, how we see next, and how AI is going to definitely make a difference. But before we start, our attendees have already seen your video business card, but what I really want to know is what inspired you to build xAI? Was it like a wish to experiment with new technologies, or it was the need and a problem you wanted to solve? What is the right approach for an entrepreneur when he's about to launch a new product or service?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's one of those where I would love to turn that into a mini seminar on its own. I'm not sure we have the 3 hours though, but anybody doing any entrepreneurial endeavor, I would be highly skeptical if you do it for the love of the technology. Hey, I'm as much as a geek as the next guy, and I could sit around all day just geeking out on my laptop with a Diet Coke and be happy. I don't think that is the right approach, though, to start anything new. What you should do instead is to find and recognize a true, honest pain in the market, because the pain rarely changes. Technology will just change over time, become ever more sophisticated, but the pain will stay true. Now, the pain we latched onto is one of those decades-long pain points that we just almost accepted, that of setting up meetings. And it's just a little tiny chore in your inbox, right? For where 3 times a day you get an email asking if you and me can have a chat, and we do a little bit of email ping pong, come to a conclusion, one of us send out an invite, and it's not difficult. It's just yet another chore for where if I could escape it, I would be slightly happier. So the beginning was really just one for where, sadly, I'm getting older. So over the last 20 years, I've always been too frugal to hire anybody to kind of work my meetings. I do about 1,000 meetings a year. So I did that personally. If you do something for 20 years straight, one morning you'll wake up and say, this can't really be how I'm supposed to live my life. So I brought the team back together and started hacking away on X.AI to see if we could not come up with some piece of software, some AI that might just remove this from, most of us. Sure, there's some kind of corporate winners who might still have human assistants. We can talk about that, but I think they'll disappear as well. So that's what we've been working on for the last 6+ years.
Will automation, as a result of your work, bring the end of the admin assistant role? But first, what is the administrative automation? What are the benefits and the disadvantages of this admin automation itself?
So let's be super tactical here. You receive an email, or let's turn it around. I receive an email from you saying you're going to be in Manhattan in August, and I really want to meet up with you for a Diet Coke at the office. You and me now need to figure out when you arrive, when you'll be in Manhattan, when you and me can meet, for how long, what is my address, and assemble an invite. Anybody can do that 2 hours out of college. Hell, anybody can do that in middle school. But actually doing it is a 2-3 minute cost for every kind of email back and forth. That doesn't sound like much, but anything which you do 1,000 times over, and here's a little stat for you, it takes on average 8.01 emails, including the invite, to set up a meeting. So that means 3.5 emails on my end. If I do 1,000 meetings, that's 3,500 emails a year that I need to write to make that happen. If that can disappear, I'm actually doing the same meetings with the same people at the same time, but all of a sudden, I have all this extra time for a little chore that I don't have to do. So that is what we are removing. And we are not alone in that. So removing things for where I'm actually doing very machine-like tasks actually free me up to do very human-like tasks. So I'm a big fan of that. That's the first part. The other part where you might allude to kind of cruel version of the future for where we are taking away jobs. Well, I think there's 2 parts here. There's the part for where are there jobs we think humans should be doing to begin with. And I think if you ask any assistant, do you like setting up meetings for your boss? They will tell you in private, no, I bloody hate it, but I have to do it so I can do the fun parts of my job. So even human assistants would like to escape this. And I don't think they're going to go anywhere. I just don't think they need to do this particular task.
What is the future of XAI? What XAI will be able to do in the future? Let me ask you that way.
Here's a naive, perhaps, but a version of the future I want to live in. Let me provide you a small analogy. So you and me are sadly getting older. So we have a memory of signing contracts. And if I just go back to my last venture, which is not 1 million years ago, that's like 7 years ago, every single employee contract, every single customer contract, every single investor contract, anything which needed my signature was me printing it, going to the printer, going back to my desk, signing it, scanning it, turning it into a PDF and sending it back. Hell, sometimes I would even FedEx it. You and me can have a laugh about that as in, Dennis, that's ages ago. Not really. It's like yesterday. Then we woke up one morning and you and me haven't signed anything of late. I said, I don't even know where to put it if I sign something. Now, that's something for where we just blink and all of a sudden a chore completely disappeared. Well, you and me and most people have still been roped into manually schedule a meeting. I want that to be the same moment for where, you know what? That dude, Dennis, and his friends came along and things changed. And we wake up in 2025, and you and me haven't touched anything to do with the meeting, and they're all just these simple requests, and it completely disappeared. That's the version of the future I want to live in, that it fully automated and completely disappeared. Then we can talk about all the sexy stuff I want to attach to it, but I want the chore to disappear, the original pain, the reason why we started the company. And I think we are, on our way there.
Well, in regards of where you see the future, obviously, future comes and with or without us, right? And we're entrepreneurs. It means we always take risks. So what is the future of your company? How do you see it? What else would you like to achieve, both in terms of added functionalities and needs that you're going to be, even some of them might be unclear yet to the people, but they will find out they have them. And I read in one of your past interviews that you're talking about killing the inbox. So maybe that's kind of the beginning of the answer, but maybe not.
There's many answers to a host of questions there. So that particular statement is actually a love affair I have with email. So I think, and this is just me getting geeky on you now, but I think many people will conflate the inbox and their hate for having to get up at 8 a.m. in the morning, looking at 100 unread emails and having to work through them. And that of the email protocol, I am in love with email. I love the fact that there's a slow, asynchronous communication channel where you can email me today and it's okay for me to reply tomorrow. As in, that is lovely in this particular world we live in. Now, the inbox, well, there's just a lot of flim-flam in that inbox. Here's a good little test we can all run. I encourage everybody to do it. So go back, take a look at your job description. So somebody hired you at some point, and as they hired you, that job offering would have 7 bullets for what they wanted you to do. Say you're an account manager, a recruiter, a salesperson, a product manager, whatever it might be. There's a number of things they wanted you to do. Take those handful of bullets, then look at your inbox. See how many of those emails in your inbox actually match to what you were hired to do, because that should really be 100%. It isn't. It isn't. So that is kind of my dislike for the inbox. I would like that to be as pristine and clean as possible. So you and me do exactly what we love to do, what we're good at, not the other little admin things like signing contracts and scheduling meetings and planning travels and getting our receipts reimbursed so I can get $10 back for that bagel. All of that, that's not what makes a good product manager or a startup founder. No, that should disappear. So that's a comment to that statement. Now, where do I see us in the future? 2 comments to that. One, this is just a kind of entrepreneurial statement. It is very easy to be kind of half-assed at 7 things. It is almost impossible to be world-class at one thing. I would like to be, if I could, world-class at scheduling meetings. Just do one thing, but do it so well that it can't really be debated. So we're hyper-focused on that. That doesn't mean that we don't have ambition. So on our ambition, I think it falls into a couple of parts. There's the very mechanics that we talked about of getting a meeting on the calendar, using perhaps our AI agent, which understands natural language. So I can say things like, scheduler, can you get Elena and I together in Manhattan for 40 minutes at the office with Amin and Marcus? Marcus is optional. And even in my kind of poor Danish English grammar, the agent needs to understand, who am I? What other promises did it make on my behalf earlier to other people? What did I ask for in this meeting? What does my calendar look like? Who do I need to reach out to? And all of that good stuff. Those are the mechanics. Now, outside of the mechanics, I do think, and there's a few things here that we'd like to touch on, the additional chores that comes attached to a meeting. I'll give you just something super basic. So you come to Manhattan, and we should actually meet downtown, get some sushi, spend an hour and a half and talk about how we can collaborate. But I already have an OpenTable account. Why can't you just log in, see when Haro Sushi is open, book a table? Because you set up the meeting. You know when it's at, you know the participants, as in the AI knows the participant. Just book the damn table. Hey, you know the distance. You know where my office is at. You know where the restaurant is at. Is it too far to walk? Just log into my Uber account and book an Uber. Why am I even booking that myself? You know when we're supposed to be there. I should just walk out the door. The car is there. It takes me to the address. The dinner is served and it takes me back again. So those additional chores for where you booking an Uber or you booking a table, that's machine tasks. That's not human tasks. Those we want to kind of rope into the agent so that will do that at the same time. That's the one part. Then there's the other, perhaps further out into the future part, which I really fantasize about. So if you think about meeting scheduling, it's really a network coordination challenge. I'll give you a little example. So my office is down on Wall Street in Manhattan. I have 3 meetings in Midtown next week. It takes me half an hour to get up, half an hour to get back. It's on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That means I have 3 hours of commute to get to Midtown next week. Those 3 hours, what if I met with the same people, but on Wednesday at 1, 3, and 5? That means the same people, the same week, for the same duration, but with 1 hour commute. Well, that means I've created 2 hours out of thin air. But why don't you do that, Dennis? Well, because I'm at the mercy of my guests' calendars. They are at the mercy of their guest calendars. They are at the mercy of their guest calendars. So there's these dramatic ramifications if you want to change anything around. But what if you ran the whole thing as one single network? Then we could have everybody meet in a hyper-optimized way, which no human could do. It's almost like traffic is shitty. Why? Because humans are driving around looking for parking space on the island here. What if all the cars were driven by one single network? Then you could network optimize it, and it would be a very different traffic pattern. It's the same with meetings. That's the kind of future I want to live in, which is we have less commute. Everybody meets with those they're supposed to meet with in a way more coordinated way, which is superhuman. Sorry, I went too far.
I see that PAs are having nightmares with you. Imagine they have to find a new job. So what does it mean? Let's say you're hiring an AI, right? So how do you pick it? How do you interview it? How do you train AI? How do you keep it good? And how do you make it do the work? So how would you determine that it's not servicing the purpose that it was hired for? So all these things, if we talk now about the services market, of course, I'm sure we are not going to have time enough to discuss the economics behind it, but I think these questions are going to give us a good idea of your thinking.
There was a time for where you and me could turn up at an office for a job interview and bring nothing but ourselves and perhaps a few past experiences and a good story. And on the back of that, we would get hired. And there's nothing wrong with that. I do think, though, in the not too distant future, if you just come alone, that might be too little. What you should bring is a little army of AI assistants that you've hired, trained, and know how to work with. As in, if you turn up at a new job, say you're an account manager, your primary job is to speak to clients. You'll do 40 kind of client chats a week. If you tell people, yeah, I just like to kind of do email ping pong and kind of text back and forth, they should kind of look at you in a kind of skeptical way and say, that seems odd. As in, you must have some software in mind here. And I think it's becoming or potentially becoming your responsibility to bring pre-trained AI agents that can help assist you in you doing your job. So you're not just hiring Dennis. You're hiring Dennis and this little army behind me that I actually bring in the door. There might even be a set of associated cost attached to that. And that, I think, is certainly a version of the future for where we can't come in shirtless thinking that is just enough. It must be something beyond that. And it used to be that, I know how to use Microsoft Office. I think that's going to be a slightly more sophisticated answer in the future.
Dennis, thank you so much. Let's continue our discussion just in a second from now.
This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual.
We're here with Dennis, who is the founder of XAI, in discussions about the future of work. How is it going to be? What are we going to hire? Are we going to hire people, human beings, or AI and artificial intelligences? Where are we heading next? He's the one to speak about, because since over, I believe, 7 years now, he's running XAI as a platform, as a service for people who would like to schedule meetings. And his goal is to be the best at this. Our discussion continues with Dennis. And Dennis, you are a serial entrepreneur, expert in leveraging data. XAI was founded back in 2014. You have a co-founder, Marcus, your goal was to solve this painful problem, scheduling meetings through sophisticated AI platform that saves people time and efforts. Do you feel like you have reached that destination, Dennis?
So here's the thing. Any entrepreneur who does anything in any space, whether it's me trying to solve meeting scheduling or somebody else trying to solve their particular pain that they got latched onto, you always think you arrived too late. As in, it's a feeling you have, as in, is it too late? But you live in a future where normal people are yet to arrive. So we arrived, if I'm really honest, way too early. Not necessarily from a technology point of view. Certainly, it was way harder to kind of craft this technology than we had imagined. But from a social point of view. So we are in a particular space. So we can take an analogy here. There's not really any social etiquette really attached to that of storing your files in the cloud. Whether you give me a USB stick or a link to your Google Drive or Dropbox is all good with me. You're not any or more or less rude because you pick one or the other. Now, with meetings, there's actually a social etiquette that we've been putting in place, not for a couple of years, but for half a century, if not more, certainly digitally over the last 30 years, on how are you supposed to act to get you and me together. As you introduce software into the equation, there was certainly some friction in the market back in 2014 when we got started. And it was sometimes seen even as rude. Why aren't you doing this yourself? Now, that have changed dramatically over the years. I would say in March 2021, it has become almost normal and very acceptable to apply software to get two or more people together. But it wasn't normal in 2014, and we can have a laugh about that, but it wasn't. Now that it's become socially acceptable, we're seeing that we're getting closer, but we are still in the kind of early stages. But it's accelerating, both for me and other vendors in market who are attacking the kind of space that's similar to ours. And before you know it, because it's somewhat exponential, it will have disappeared, and we all use software. And if you and me speak in 4 years, then we're probably at the other side of kind of, if not full market penetration, then a dramatic market penetration across the whole spectrum.
Yeah, we see actually a lot of these coming up quite fast now with voice commands. We have Google Home, we have Alexa, and many others now joining the lead, of course, starting with Siri. The question is, how far are we going there? You've mentioned something like, and I started with this. Let's try to wrap up around it. You're saying in order to survive automation, we need to double down on humanity. What do you mean?
So I took a computer science degree, so I don't mind working on the command line, which is where I took my degree. I'm sure my mom didn't mind working in the kind of graphical user interface of Windows and what have you, as she adopted it at the office. And I'm sure my daughters, who grew up on the touch interface, don't mind working that mobile phone. And it looks like we're about to kind of democratize kind of access to compute with the conversational UI. That's all good and fine. What I think happened along the way as well is that we humans took up a lot of machine tasks, things that we weren't supposed to do to begin with, but we didn't know any other way. So there's a lot of repetitive work if you have a computer at work right now that you are forced into. They're not things you're actually good at. They're actually things machines are much better at, but you do them because you can't escape them. I would love to see them escape, but once they escape, we now need to figure out what is it then that we should do. Well, we have things computers don't have: empathy, intuition, spontaneity, elements that you can't expect a computer to pick up on. Now, that we should double down on. As in, how do I make sure that my customer feels cared for, loved, appreciated? Well, that's an interesting kind of request. You and me can write on a piece of paper, but how do you execute on that? That you need human to plan out. So I really think those parts are parts where we should take a couple of steps back and figure out, well, how do we do that? We might use software for some of it, but how do we do that as humans? Not how do I go input 111 rows into a spreadsheet? Is that really what Dennis is good at? Sure, I can do it, but that's really a machine task.
Well, we are now in discussions of the survival of the entire humankind, right? We see really very disturbing signals, and we know it's true when you talk about climate, when we talk about water, environment, but also further when we talk about equality and how this could help us, empower us in fighting all the others, actually not fighting, but solving all the other challenges that the humankind is facing. On the other side, we have AI, and for the first time in the human history, we as species, as society, create something which might turn out better than us in particular areas, which means that outplay us in our own game. So with this in mind, I would say it's one of the most interesting times in the human history. And it will be obviously for the historians after 100 years to define whether we did ourselves something good or bad, whether did we right or wrong. But for sure, we need to double down on humanity. This is something I 100% agree with you, and move ahead. So maybe that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I don't think we should talk about how we can survive, but how we can really stay humans and keep our authenticity, keep developing the new environment. How do you think AI can empower us in this direction?
So there was this fantasy that come 2021, we would all be in 15-hour work weeks, and there'll be an abundance of things around us. It didn't end up being the 15-hour work week, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't fantasize about that, or given what technology might be able to do in the not too distant future, this whole idea that our whole life, or the majority of it, is attached to a desk at the office, that could change. I am very optimistic even though perhaps at this very moment in time where it looks the darkest, whether that be on kind of conflict or climate change or something kind of similar, I think it might just be the bottom, that there was a decade or two for where it looked very dark, and then we escaped it. I am super optimistic. I could be very naive, and people will have a laugh on my behalf, I'm sure. But there certainly seems to be an indication that we might just solve many of the very ills that we're looking at right now. And that kind of fantasy of the future that we had hoped for might come to fruition. So if we take, pick climate change. I'm no expert. I'm, as naive as you are, but I do follow it. As in, if you and me just go look at, I don't know, the cost of solar panels or the utilization of coal in any number of European countries, as in, those charts are super encouraging. As in, what we had imagined 30 years ago and where we're at today, that would have seemed like complete sci-fi. But it isn't. As in, we actually did deliver on that solar panel fantasy. Or 50 years ago, escaping the idea of using coal, say, in England, that was the latest statistic I saw on whatever level they are applying that now, that just seemed completely unrealistic. But we reached it. So I just think, you can come by my apartment and we can talk about how I think this could be kind of, the darkest hour, and it's all kind of upwards from here. There'll be many kind of speed bumps and hiccups and kind of scenarios where you could email me and say, Dennis, I don't think this is for the better. No, it isn't. But I do think this is the moment for where plenty of the data we collect, plenty of the predictions we can make, and the AIs we put in place will see us continue to improve those solar panels, if we use that analogy, or continue to see those self-driving cars being put in motion. So those, 43K people who die in the US alone every year, kind of don't die. I really think it's a very bright future that we're heading into. And again, call me naive.
Wonderful.
That's what I want to be.
That's the way I would like to have all our discussions concluded. I am a believer in the bright future and in the global conspiracy for the good of humankind. But of course, it's up to all of us, each and every entrepreneur, to build and to add to that value while supporting their own communities, supporting initiatives, and making sure that we all make the best of ourselves and being the best version of us every second of our life. Dennis, that was a great wrap up of what we were discussing. I'm wishing you really the best for XAI and for the endeavor that you are on to. Keep my fingers crossed. You really become the best in scheduling, because that really kills a lot of time for many people. Thank you so much for being our guest. Thanks for joining and sharing your thoughts and vision for the future. As I've mentioned jokingly, most probably a lot of people now say, those of you who are having their personal assistants, if they replace them one day, what is going to happen? Most probably there will be a very, very, very good opportunity for your personal assistants to help you much better, not wasting time with personal scheduling. That's the same applies for many other jobs that we're looking at replacing with AI. We will see what the future holds during the next many WEBIT virtual events on the topics of how artificial intelligence and us as society architects, builders, and of course us as a WEBIT community are changing the world. Thank you again for being with us. This was another WEBIT virtual event bringing the WEBIT community together. Looking forward to see you again next Tuesday, same time. Dennis, thank you again. Thank you all for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual.